If you're a lawyer who wants to podcast, check out legalpodcasting.com.
This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.
We have attorney Derek DeCosmo here. He's going to be talking to us about immigration law.
They did put a temporary amnesty in that program because they knew that this new bill was going to be very restricted. So there was a type of amnesty in that bill, but that sunsetted or that expired on April 2001. So that expires. And again, these things limit the number of individuals that can come in and out of the country. And so again, subsequent to that, we had the terrorist attacks of 9/11, and there were some additional provisions put in the law, mainly targeting asylum seekers, because if you remember the first World Trade Center bombing, that was orchestrated by an imam who came to the United States who was trying to get political asylum. And while that case was pending out, he was a part of that first attempt to take down the towers. So after the towers went down a second time, although most of the people involved were here on student visas, they were have training at flight schools and things like that, they restricted the laws a little bit more. George W. Bush recognized the need for immigrant labor, and because, for example, the main type of visa for immigrants, we can talk about the H-1B. That's the one I think that's more popularly discussed politically nowadays, but the H-2B is your temporary work visa. The H-2Bs and H-2As, and these are people that are coming to work in landscaping, work in construction, pick vegetables on a farm, etc. But it's capped number. There's only 60,000 of those visas for the whole United States. So it's never been indexed to the relative economic need of the United States. For example, obviously your show is based in New Jersey. New Jersey could probably use all 60,000 for the number of people they employ at the shore each summer, because most of those folks are foreign-born individuals. So what George W. Bush wanted to do was to create a temporary work program and overhaul the immigration system. And that actually only failed by one vote. But you had a lot of bipartisan support for that bill. It broke down in the end. Since that point, whether it's the Obama administration, first Trump administration, Biden administration, or now second Trump administration, the immigration issue has largely become a political football, right? That both parties really want to use, where prior to that, for the decades prior to that, there was a lot of bipartisan support for certain things in the immigration law. So that kind of brings us up to today. I don't want to, I'll let you ask.
Then the law is largely the same since 9/11. The laws kind of remain the same since then.
Yeah, and more so 5 years before that, the 1996 bill was the real big change. And it was a flawed bill, which is why you continue to have, depending on your perspective, problems, right? Now, another problem though that you have, which I think kind of has led us to what we're seeing today, which is, a strong push towards immigration enforcement, is that for the majority of my career, my 20-year career, you maybe had about 400,000 people cross the border each year without status. You maybe had around 300,000 who would come on, say, a tourist visa and not leave. So roughly a number between 700,000 and 1 million. But each year, 1 million people would obtain permanent status. So the overall number of undocumented people in the United States, that number kind of hovered just right around that number they talk about a lot, which is like 11 million people. Right. And that stayed true up until the Biden administration, unfortunately, where it seems like the number of people in a non-permanent type status, some literally brought by the Biden administration through some executive actions, and then people coming over the southern and northern borders, at least 3 million people a year. So we had a static number of about 11 million undocumented people for decades, and probably the number as of today, I wouldn't be surprised, because they haven't really released the numbers, but I'm not going to be surprised if it's between 22 and 25 million. And that's a difference, right? Because the country very easily, almost without people even noticing, could assimilate the number of people coming in, more people getting legal. But where you start to see the pressure points of this is in places like school districts, right? That all of a sudden overnight they need, they need 20 more bilingual staff to deal with students and their parents. And I mean, I am an immigration attorney. I've worked in this field for decades. I am very much pro-immigrant. I think that there is the net positives of immigration far outweigh any of the struggles or the setbacks. But the things that people are frustrated about, that kind of really, the election came down to this issue. I mean, people can talk about what they like or dislike about President Trump, or what they didn't like or liked about Kamala Harris, but the turning point issue was immigration and the consensus of the majority of Americans that they wanted to see some action on it, because the pressure points that they're seeing were difficult, whether it was school districts, things with healthcare. The other problem is that until the Biden administration, my clients, they never got rental assistance or it didn't exist. It didn't exist, which is why I could always say, look, my clients are here working, doing the jobs that need to get done, building families, starting businesses, very much care about security as well, within their communities and their schools, et cetera. And they're not getting anything for it, and they're paying taxes. But, we saw what we saw with Hotel Roosevelt in New York, where, the city of New York is funding housing for people for very extended period of time, and so on and so on. So it became, the political issue it is, and then a perception that immigrants are committing a higher level of crimes, which data-wise, that's not true. The amount of crimes committed by the immigrant population is lesser than the Native American born population, but this perception of it then, of this crime issue, led to 2 weeks ago the passage of the Lake and Riley Act. And the Lake and Riley Act is essentially expands upon the 1996 law that I mentioned, that it categorizes more people as the government being required to detain them mandatorily without the option to get bail.
So let's come back to that one. So just to recap then, you're saying that back before the 1950s, when the modern sort of framework of immigration was passed, that there was basically get on a boat, sail to America, and if you clear like the medical screening, you're in, right? Is that so? Did you have to bring anything with you, like when you came? Like, did you have to have a certain amount of money? Did you have to have identification? Like what was there any sort of like minimum requirement?
No. There really wasn't. Anything.
And you became then like a permanent resident, and then you worked towards citizenship, or how did that work?
Yeah, there was an I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but there was.
You didn't practice law in the 1940s?
Yeah. There was some type of a period before you became a citizen or could be sworn in as a citizen. Currently now you have to be a permanent resident, or what the colloquial thing is to say a green card holder. You have to be in that status for 5 years before you can apply for citizenship.
So now, present day now, does it differ? Does the process differ in how to come here legally, like based on what country you're from?
That's a great question. There isn't anything that favors necessarily one country over another. I mean, in practical terms, there are, but in terms of the written law, there isn't a faster pathway, except for when, individual presidents use their executive authority to carve up some exceptions. The Biden administration greatly expanded two things. One is temporary protected status. So if you're from a country where there's a natural disaster, a civil war, et cetera, the president, through the head of Homeland Security, can designate. So, for example, earthquake in Haiti, right? The president can designate a period of, if you were already in the United States, we're going to give you this temporary protected status for a period of 18 months until things might get better in your country and you can return. However, from the original designations, and some of them go back to the 1990s, they just kept getting extended. President Trump in his first term tried to eliminate them. There were legal battles, and so not only did the Biden administration bring them back, he added designations. He also created a parole program specific to 4 countries, which were Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. And this to me,
the parole program.
I'm going to explain it, and it's really the direct causal relationship, I think, to the kind of national backlash that led to really spurred on President Trump's election for this second term. So essentially, the temporary protected status, there's some controversy about it, but not much because those people were already here. The Biden parole program for the 4 countries I mentioned was literally, hey, have somebody in the United States fill out a piece of paper, send it to us, and we'll basically give you a visa, which is a parole, but parole and visa are very similar, and also a work card, which I have clients here who have not committed any crime, who are here 20 plus years working, paying taxes. They don't have a legal entry to the United States. They don't have a work card. And so what happens when, and I'll say this, and I think I'd have colleagues that would challenge me on it, but there was certainly among the people that got these countries that got designated this special parole, more of a sense of entitlement when they hey, I'm here now. Well, where's my rental assistance? Where's my cell phone? Where's my this, and this? Because, they had no stake in the United States. It's not like it's my wife filling out this little piece of paper to send to the government so that I can be paroled in.
And which where was it again? I heard Cuba or the other.
Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Haiti. And then to what President Trump campaigned on, yeah, Venezuela, there's wonderful Venezuelans, but you also did get a lot of their criminals because it was a way for their president to get rid of people. And and so this parole program, which Trump has eliminated, but there is still probably about 1 million people that were able to come in on it, and now they're here. So
what was the logic behind it? Like, what in favor of it anyway?
I think that I've pondered that myself because the thing of it is clearly people on the pro-immigration side, the activist side, had to be advocating, lobbying the administration for this. To me, the Haitians that were here already were still under this temporary protected status. And, and so to say, well, now we're going to bring in more people just because, what I think the thought process of the Biden administration was that there was a high number of Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Venezuelans and Cubans showing up on the southern border. And that was a bad optic because the numbers, the flow of the southern border is a problem to try to take stress off of that border. Yeah, we're going to roll out the red carpet and fly in. And again, that has led to some problems for sure. But that's where we are. So now President Trump has ended those programs, but as I said, you have at least 1 million people here from those programs, plus this many millions that have come across the border. So, we'll see what's going to happen. I know what is happening currently. But the other problem too, which was unfortunate of President Biden creating those programs, was that if, let's say, I married somebody from anywhere in the world, right? Whether it's I married somebody from Brazil or Britain, wherever, instead of it taking a couple months for my wife to come as a permanent resident.
I know all about this one, Derek. My brother waited 1.5 years to.
And a lot of people are waiting close to 4 years because they didn't hire any more people to do these parole applications. They probably received about 2 million of them, processed almost 1 million. So they took officers that were working on the normal stuff that immigration, what's called U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, what they're supposed to be working on, had to stop working on it to work on things for this program. So, it led to a lot of frustration and, quite frankly, resentment among people that are trying to engage in the process.
And those are people essentially that just a lot of them U.S. citizens applying to have their wives come over, family members come over, parents come over.
Pretty much all all of them U.S. citizens. I'm not even talking about employment stuff. I'm talking about U.S. citizens trying to bring their husband, wife, and kids. I don't know what priority level processing applications in a timely fashion is going to be for this administration. I think that is something to be seen. I think that it's better for everyone for these things to be done quickly and efficiently. So I'm hoping because of that, maybe we'll see things get more reasonable, because it's like, I mean, I do Zooms with couples and it's like, okay, we're ready to be together forever. I finished my master's degree in Great Britain, and my husband here, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we're looking at about 4 years. That's not reasonable for people trying to start their lives or be reunited with immediate family. I'm not even talking about me trying to bring my sister or my brother. I'm talking immediate family. I'm talking wives and kids.
Wives, parents, kids. Yeah.
So we'll see what's going to happen with that. It's to be determined.
So we're in 2025. Walk me through the different processes in which somebody who is living abroad says, you know what, I want to immigrate to the United States.
So that's a great question, because pretty much every one of your questions has an answer, because there's problems that lead to a problem that we have, or that or perceived problems that we have with our system. So if I'm outside of the United States, if I have an immediate family member, like such as a spouse, they can petition for me.
Right.
We have student visas. They're not
permanent. In those applications, when you're talking about a spouse, like, so long as there's no fraud in the relationship aspect, I mean, that's pretty much a guaranteed thing to eventually get brought over here. Is that fair?
As long as there's no fraud and also criminal history.
Right.
There are visas, there are student visas, there are work visas, but the problem is that again, we don't have our work visas indexed to economic need, never have. They're just arbitrary numbers. And so a lot of times we have a lot more need than we have visas available. So that's not always an option or a good option. And then largely what you have is, folks who just want to be here, right? So you get large numbers of people claiming asylum or trying to come to the United States and claim asylum who really don't qualify for asylum as that's written.
They have to fit into one of the categories to come here, and most of those categories are: do you have family here? Do you have some sort of expertise? You're going to come work here that we can't do, get that anywhere else, right? And then other than asylum, what other boxes are there?
I mean, those are really the three main. Those are the three main buckets, right? Those are the three. So a lot of people, if they don't have that immediate family member and they lack the professional expertise to be sponsored, and again, the business visas are capped anyway. There's not enough of them. So people just try to flood in and take their shot. And so what happens is, you're either trying to force a square peg into a round hole to try to fit yourself into some category that maybe you do or don't qualify for, or, you're just rolling the dice. Let me get there. Let me work in the United States and until it catches up to me,
Yeah.
That's what happens.